Corporate governance is a major issue when it comes to Asia's real estate industry and investment. To speak about how CapitaLand deals with the issue is the company's CFO, Mr. Arthur Lang. Mr. Lang, what is CapitaLand's approach to corporate governance?
You know, I think at the end of the day, I think what is really the most important thing is to ensure that corporate governance, or the right level of corporate governance, is institutionalized and I would say internalized by all the employees at CapitaLand. I think they need to understand the reason why we're doing this. It is not, there's always the tendency when it comes to corporate governance or compliance processes to be treated as a necessary inconvenience or a check in the box type of exercise. I think this is what we want to avoid. And we want to make sure that the conduct of business, that the employees internalize the fact that at the end of the day, we are answerable to our stakeholders.
Well, what challenges do you face when it comes to developing countries such as China?
I think there needs to be the organizational patience to ensure that we play the long game. I think for CapitaLand, we've paid our tuition fees. We've been in China for almost 20 years now. And in the beginning, it was very challenging. I think one needs to get to understand the business culture, the business practices, the regulatory requirements, and the market dynamics of that specific country. Even for China, I mean, if you look at individual cities, each has very different characteristics from one another. So I would say the challenges that we face are quite unique. And I think the challenge is basically to make sure that the organization is behind you and to make sure that it's willing to commit and play the long game, because there's never is an overnight success story.
Well, you're based in Asia, but you also deal with Australia. So do you find there's higher standards when it comes to corporate governance there, and how do you address this?
In terms of higher levels of corporate governance, I think for us it's not so much that we have presence in Australia or not. I think it's more of the fact that we have 8 listed entities within the CapitaLand Group. Some are listed in Singapore, one is listed in Australia, and the others are listed in Malaysia. If you look at the jurisdictions, and being a listed company, I think will bring about a higher level of, I would say, in terms of scrutiny when it comes to corporate governance. There's also higher expectations from shareholders and investors.
How does CapitaLand manage corruption?
We have a zero tolerance for corruption, and this, I would say, will come from the very top, from my board, from my CEO, down to the employee in the rank and file. So we do place a lot of emphasis in terms of ensuring that we have the right policies and the right processes in terms of stamping out any fraud or any type of corruption. I think in terms of responsibilities of management and employees, it is very clear that there needs to be an anti-corruption culture in the organization. Now, having said all that, it's nice to have processes, it's nice to have a lot of these policies in place. But at the end of the day, it's actually the people that matter. So we need to really focus, and we do focus a lot on hiring the right people for the job. And when I say right, it's people not only who are smart, who have the technical skills, but more importantly, people with the right moral compass, and also people with integrity.
What steps does CapitaLand take when addressing risk assessment and management?
We're not going in to look at situations where we want to entirely remove all risk. Because if that's the case, we might as well close shop. Because if there's no risk that we're going to take, there's no return we're going to make. So I think how we approach risk management is, if you look at the organization, what is the capacity or the appetite for risk? And how does that appetite and capacity relate to the corporate strategy? And once I think this risk appetite is clearly stated or clearly agreed upon between the board and management, it is much easier. Then we can make decisions based on this risk appetite that we have agreed upon, and all the risk limits and the processes and all that can be tied in or can be set with respect to this risk appetite. So, whether it's investment opportunities, whether it's treasury policies and all that, that will be guided by the type of or the amount of risk that we want to take. So within these parameters, then we will look at basically all the key risks that our group would face in our various markets, and what are the right controls and whether these controls are effective.
How have real estate investment trusts grown in Asia, and how do you see them developing?
If you look at why the REIT product has been so successful in Singapore, I would say it's because of, one, I think the right regulatory framework. I think was a lot of support from the regulators to really grow this asset class. Very clear and transparent policies. How I see this, kind of developing, I think there's still a lot of potential in the REIT market, particularly in Singapore. Singapore is a wealth center for not only Southeast Asia, but I would say it's fast becoming a wealth center for the world. And capital preservation and wealth preservation is very important now, especially given very volatile markets where, sometimes if you just put into products where you got, wild swings in value, I mean, sometimes you will lose your wealth. So I would say, a lot of investors want to preserve their wealth. And I think the REIT product is one of the most suited products to preserve wealth because it is yield-based, it is based on cash flow, and from a tax perspective, it is very beneficial to the retail investor. So I see a lot of potential and promise for the REIT product.
And finally, how do you aim to develop corporate governance within CapitaLand?
I think what is important is we need to continue to focus in communicating very consistently and very frequently to our stakeholders, especially in these markets now, right? It's very volatile. Things change, a lot of regulatory policies change, a lot of accounting standards change. And as a result, I think stakeholders would appreciate the fact that we have a very open channel of communication with them.
Mr. Lang, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah.